Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. I'd like to thank Jeff Baumann and Joe Fitzgerald for joining us today. Joe began his career with Northeast Financial Network shortly after graduating from Ramapo College. He's been recognized many times for his accomplishments and dedication to his clients, qualifying every year since 2011 for both National Leaders Club and Million Dollar Roundtable. Since 2013, he's been a part of his firm's mentoring team for new advisors, helping them learn and grow their career while continuing to grow his own team, client base, and expertise. In 2018, he obtained his Retirement Income Certified Professional designation, which focuses on key retirement issues such as income gaps, taxation, asset management, and estate planning. Now, Jeff began his career in financial services back in 2007, working on Wall Street. The Great Recession afforded him the opportunity to see firsthand how traditional planning, products, and strategies failed an entire generation of Americans, and it helped him to realize that something was missing from his career. It wasn't until 2013, when he was recruited to join Northeast Financial Network, that he realized his passion was in making a positive impact on others' lives, both personally and professionally. And we're proud to say that Jeff is an alumnus of Rutgers Business School. And Jeff, I'm going to let you take it from here. Thanks so much.
Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well, and thank you, Margaret, for the kind words and introduction. We're really excited to be here today to present on what we hope you'll find to be both a valuable and informative use of your time, and a topic that I know that we're both really passionate about. So before we get started, I want to give a little bit more information about who we are, what we do, and really why we do what we do. It wasn't until 2013, when I was recruited to the firm, that I realized my passion in helping others, and I was fortunate enough to meet Joe, who from the start of his career was blessed to have been mentored by some of the brightest minds and really most successful advisors in the country, and someone who had established himself as a rising star in our industry really at a young age. And now, almost 8 years later, we continue to work closely together, building our practice, helping our clients from all walks of life and throughout all the stages of their financial life to properly really help build, protect, and distribute their wealth most efficiently. So, although we have helped hundreds of households, really get organized and through their financial lives, we're students first, and we're constantly investing in ourselves and in our business, and really always looking to improve ourselves and our knowledge base. So when we were asked to speak today, we wanted to choose a topic that would really have the biggest impact in a relatively short amount of time. In this digital age, information is coming at us faster than ever. And so really all of us are exposed to a lot of really misinformation, and with all the personal finance advice on TV and strewn across the internet, and it can be hard to decipher fact from fiction. So a lot of it is misguided information, and a lot of it is well-intended, but really a lot of it fails to mention the disadvantages of traditional financial planning, both products and strategies. And really, some of these myths could be stopping you from achieving your ultimate personal success. So here's some scary statistics to paint the picture of what's going on in the country today. So 26% of Americans have savings of less than $1,000. 54% of Americans have savings of less than $25,000. 62% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. For almost half the population thinks that financial matters cause the most amount of stress in their lives. Americans have $953 billion in credit card debt. The average student graduates with $35,000 of student loan debt, and collective student loan debt in America is more than $1 trillion. 31% of Americans actually have saved $0 for retirement. 47% have less than $50,000 saved for retirement, and 35% of Americans rely completely on Social Security. So, kind of an uphill battle that we're facing today. And I'll pass the mic over to Joe to talk a little bit about why he thinks that is.
Excited to be here, just to piggyback a little bit on Jeff's statements. Jeff and I and our team are extremely passionate about helping people understand these myths and really solve this big problem, this big challenge going on in the world today. And the question becomes, we arguably live in the richest, or at least one of the richest countries in the world, and we see all those statistics. And it almost becomes mind-boggling of how and why is that occurring, and is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And one major challenge we see, something we see quite often through our years of studies, through working with clients, is it's an extremely confusing and complex world when it comes to finance. You have to plan for college education, taxes, life insurance, budgeting, real estate, investments, and you hear all these sorts of things like 401ks, IRAs, Roth, traditional, mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds, whole life insurance, term life insurance. You hear one thing from your manager at work, one thing from your uncle, one thing from your mortgage professional, one thing from your CPA, one thing from a life insurance agent, one thing from an internet article online, maybe something from your Uber driver, and it can be very confusing and complex and very difficult to kind of navigate through all this information and figure out how to put ourselves in the best position and kind of figure out what's myth, what's fact, how do we succeed, what should we be doing with our money. The abundance of information is great, but it also can create people to become paralyzed, not know what to do, and really not sure if they're making the right decision. So figuring out these myths and figuring out how can I do the absolute best things with my money is really what we look to help people accomplish. And the great thing is, as long as you can kind of get through all the fog, there's some tremendous ways. And the first step we find, like Jeff said, is to kind of take a look at why are most people not succeeding, what myths are out there, and understanding that first is what can really help achieve success. So what we're looking to focus on today and go over some of the most powerful myths. Jeff and I sat back, we spent a few hours kind of saying, hey, from the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of clients we have helped and worked with directly, what did we see as the biggest myths when they first sat down with us? What information were we able to provide that we feel had the biggest impact on helping them go out into the world and succeed financially? The number one myth that we saw is involving taxes. And if you take a look at it, taxes are probably the biggest wealth eroding factor that exists. Taxes can easily eat up 50% or more of our wealth over time between income tax, state tax, property tax, gas tax, sales tax, capital gains tax, all these different taxes that come into play. So understanding taxes are very important. And a big myth that we see, it can almost be black and white advice where we hear people they're under the impression that they will 100% be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. Now, what we help people understand is they may or may not be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. It's a myth to feel that is a 100% fact. This relates very strongly to the funding of 401ks, IRAs, great accounts. Don't go stopping those accounts. We're big supporters of those accounts, but something extremely important to understand is we do not know what tax bracket we will be in when we retire. If you take a look at this chart, this green chart, what it's showing is the historic tax rates going all the way back until 1913. What's quite interesting if you take a look is tax rates change. We see it right now with an election. We hear this president will lower taxes, this president will raise taxes. One thing we know is taxes will move over time. And there's two factors that determine what tax rate we will be in when we retire. It's one, from a kind of macroeconomic standpoint, where are taxes at from where the government puts them? We can't control that. And then two, where's our personal income at? Reason why this is so important is you cannot enter the situation and simply say, I will be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. So because of that reason, let me put all of my money into a pre-tax account, pay the taxes later when I retire, because I will simply be in a lower tax bracket. That is a big myth. And what is a better understanding is to say, I do not know where taxes will be when I retire. I do not know what my tax bracket will be. And in fact, with our clients, it's almost a goal of, hey, let's be in the highest tax bracket possible when I retire, but pay little or no taxes. And there's strategies to do that, which, you know, we can certainly help with. And when you take a look at it, we sit in a very low tax environment right now. So the question becomes for people who are maxing out their 401k every year from a young age into a pre-tax account, and what that means for people who are listening on the other end who may not have that understanding, that means you don't pay the taxes today, you pay it later. Could be a great strategy. There's some great benefits. You get a good tax deduction right now, but the problem is it's not a tax savings, it's a tax postponement. It may or may not be a tax savings, which purely depends on where tax rates are at. But if you take a look at maxing out a 401k from your 20s or 30s, you'll have a few $1,000,000, if not more, of a future of an account which you have to pay taxes on when you take it out, knowing that you're contributing in a low environment. Where will taxes be when we retire? So big myth to take a look at. Again, doesn't mean pre-tax accounts are bad. It just means let's look at that risk and how do we handle it. It's not a pure fact to look at. Now we'll kind of pass back to Jeff here and go over a second big myth.
So another common myth and something that we hear all the time is compound interest creates a financial miracle. So you know, it's been said that it's the eighth wonder of the world, and really what compound interest can be thought of as interest on interest. So if I have $1 today and I earn 5% on that, I have $1.05. The next time I earn 5%, I'm earning the 5% on the larger number. So you know, it can work for you, it can work against you, and you know, I guess a simple analogy to think of compound interest is making snowmen. It's you know, an analogy that we like to use. And really, when you think about making snowmen with your kids, or when you were a little kid and you know, spinning the first spins of the snow, it doesn't really pick up much snow until you're rolling it across the lawn or down a hill. And as the snowball gets bigger and bigger, the snowball gets big. It's picking up more and more snow in each spin. And money kind of works the same way. It's not until the end of the curve that you really see the main growth on that too. You know, that's what we call the takeoff phase. And here's a good example of compound interest working for someone. So we've got two savers here, saver A and saver B. They're both saving $10,000 a year, earning 7% on their money. So you know, saver A starts at a young age, 25, and saves until 65, so 40 years. Saver B lives in the moment, you know, doesn't save that $10,000 a year in his or her 20s. Spends it and starts saving at age 30. You know, saver A saved a total of $400,000. Saver B saved a little bit less, you know, $350,000. Not a major difference there, but the lost opportunity cost is pretty massive. It's almost $1 million, and you know, that's due to compound interest. You know, just 5 years of postponement can cost almost $1 million of actual wealth. And here's an example of compounding tax. So really, when you're compounding in a tax-deferred or taxable investment, you know, you're compounding wealth, but also you're compounding tax. And so unlike math, money is affected by a lot of factors. So inflation, taxes, lost opportunity costs, fluctuating interest rates, you know, just many things that can kind of melt the snowball as you're making that snowman. So in taxable accounts, interest is credited each year, you know, as the account balance grows, which is a good thing. You know, your wealth is increasing. And then unfortunately, if you're in that taxable or tax deferred account, what's also happening is you're compounding that tax, which you can see on the bottom there. So kind of like an iceberg example, you know, what you see is the tip of the iceberg maybe being a good thing and being the wealth that you've accumulated through compounding interest, but what you don't see is the compounding tax in these accounts. So I guess one question I like to ask clients, and this maybe sounds a little simple, but if there was a way to compound interest without compounding tax, how soon would you want to know about it? Next slide. And you can see here in this example, there's really a lost wealth of about $166,000 because the income tax was compounding as well. Now, another myth is rate of return on my assets is more important than regular savings habits. So again, we're going to take a look at 3 different examples here. Person A saving 5% of their income, earning 8% rate of return. Person B saving 20% of their income, earning 0% rate of return. And then person C, who's saving 20% and earning 5%. So with Americans' personal savings rates at historic lows, let's take a closer look at these 3 different scenarios. So as you can see here, the person A who's saving just 5% of their income, but who's getting an after-tax rate of return of 8% of their money for 30 years, has a realized wealth of about $2.2 million, a little bit less than that. Most of the wealth is being lost to taxes, debt, and lifestyle. So let's remember that number, a little bit less than 2.2 million. Let's take a look at saver B. So saver B is saving the proper amount of their income, 20%, but is getting 0% on their rate of return. So no growth, they're actually losing money year over year due to inflation. And this person actually has a little bit more than saver A, who had a great rate of return. It was netting 8% year over year for 30 years. So, person B taking on no risk, basically, getting no growth, still has more money because he's saving more money. And let's take a look at saver C. So saver C kind of combines both. So saver C is saving the proper amount of their income, 20%, and is getting, a more modest rate of return on the money, 5%. And this person, this is where the magic happens. So this individual has about $5 million of realized wealth. So really, again, savings rate is blowing rate of return out of the water in these examples here. And many studies show that, if your savings rate is 20% or more, it doesn't really matter who's in the White House, what the stock market does, or where taxes go, you're going to have a good retirement. And I'll pass the mic back to Joe.
All right, this is one of our favorite myths to help people understand. Something we see quite often when we get referred to somebody or we get asked a question when people hear what we do for our profession is, hey, what's the hottest stock? Where should I put my money right now? And those are great questions. And of course, we all kind of want to figure out the product to put our money, but something we constantly talk about is the product is secondary to the process. A good example of that is if you took Tiger Woods, and if I took his golf clubs, his product, so to say, I would not be that much better of a golfer. But if I took lessons with his best coach for a year and improved my swing, my process, I'd be much better. Focusing on product, focusing on rate of return is something that is very common, and it's a conversation, and it's a fun conversation, but it does not lead to success. There's much more factors behind it, like Jeff was mentioning in the last slide, of what amounts of money do we need to save for the short term and long term? How do we avoid taxation as we're compounding our wealth? How do we avoid future taxation upon distribution? So a little off topic there, but it relates to this all. But this specific myth we want to look at is high risk is required for a good rate of return. And we talk about what is risk. So when in good financial planning, when we say a risky investment, it's not always necessarily meaning, hey, I'm going to go throw my money on a blackjack table and maybe lose. It's more volatility. My accounts go up and down. We see that with the stock market. Back in March, we saw the market go down about 30% in a very brief time frame. Luckily, we had a nice bounce back, but that's a lot of movement on money, and it's not as big of a concern during the accumulation years, during 20s, 30s, 40s, but it can be very scary during times close to retirement. So something we try to help educate clients on is we do not necessarily, the old adage of high risk, we need high risk for good rate of return is simply not true. Now, to really dive deeply into how to accomplish that, how to obtain, our goal is to obtain high rates of return with little or no risk through proper planning. We cannot accomplish that in a 30-minute webinar with 30-minute Q&A. So we wanted to just show you in the most simplistic way, in a very brief conversation behind this, one product, one simple strategy that has been around since the 1800s, where you can obtain a very good rate of return with little to zero risk. Knowing that this is just one product, it's more, we never go and enter into a product situation without a thorough financial conversation, but one simple way to get a good rate of return on your money with little to no risk. And we'll pull this up here. And what we're going to take a look at here is a a life insurance policy that has been around. It's called cash value dividend paying whole life insurance, specifically utilized for a good cash on cash return while also providing a life insurance benefit. These accounts have been around since the 1800s. Utilized properly, they have the same tax benefits of a Roth IRA, meaning that the money can compound tax-free, and you can actually take all of your money out tax-free. And they come with guaranteed cash growth. It's almost like the tortoise versus the hare in these accounts. And again, this dispels that myth that we need to take high risk to get a good rate of return. Because when you look in the world today, bank accounts are paying basically nothing. Treasury bills are paying basically nothing. Bonds are paying basically nothing. And most of those accounts are all taxable as well. So it becomes very challenging. We have a lot of people thinking, where the heck do I put my money? I don't want to take on all of this risk with all of my money. But if I don't take on any risk, I can't get any gains. So we're going to look at an example of a 30-year-old. This is a true account of, we're using the number of investing $20,000 a year into this contract. Don't get caught up in the number. There's no minimum or no maximum. It's just a very easy number to use. Someone can put in $100 a month if they wanted, or they can put in $500,000 a year. There's no minimum, there's no maximum. If someone did half, they'd have half the results. But what you can see here from this life insurance contract, you have a few columns to look at. Age, self-explanatory, 30 years old. True historical example, someone starting this contract in 1984, depositing in $20,000 a year. Again, they can put in whatever amount they choose. Cash value, that's the investment value of the account. And death benefit. This is in the halo of a life insurance contract. So what that means is if this investor died in year one, someone would get paid out $1.7 million. As you can see, the investment value of the account grows over time, as does the life insurance. The account value would not stop growing at age 65. It just ends there because of 2019, and the system hasn't had the chance to recalculate to 2020 yet based on dividend performance. So what's pretty cool here is you can see this investor to kind of that myth of, hey, I need to take on a tremendous amount of risk to get good growth on my money is simply not true. This person would have deposited $720,000 of their own money over time. At age 65, they'd be sitting on almost $2.4 million with also a $4 million life insurance policy, which is over a 5.5% tax protected rate of return. So we like to, again, in a very brief way, there's tons of other products out there, other investments, but this is an account that's been around since the 1800s and simply just takes away that myth of, hey, I need to roll the dice with all of my money to outpace inflation, to get good gains on my money. Now, every investment comes with pros and cons. And something, if you're sitting on the other side of the webcam right now, you may be saying, well, what's going on in year one? These types of accounts are not for short-term growth on money. You can see in the second year, the person would have invested 40 grand. They only have 20,000 of cash available. But over time, your cash greatly outweighs what you put into the account, and you can obtain it all without paying a dime of taxes and still leave behind a great inheritance to your family. So another big benefit of looking at how we can obtain good rates of return on our money is when we focus on understanding that internal rate of return is not the only factor that is important when it comes to creating wealth. What I mean by that is so many people, they're so focused on how much was my return. Okay, I put money into this stock, I got 8%, I got 10%. That's almost looking at the top of the iceberg, but not what's beneath the water. Questions then we need to look at is, well, did you have to pay a tax? Did you have to pay a management fee? What type of risk did you have to take? Did you have to pay tax when you took your money out? Did you have to, be careful of, hey, I can't take my money this year because the market's down? So avoiding fees, avoiding taxation, and avoiding risk in the stock market can be rates of return in and of themselves, not an internal rate, but that's, again, when we talk about the swing over the club, the management of money, the coordination and integration of assets is what can create a tremendous life-changing difference with our wealth. And to do that, you really need to either study the subject yourself and make sure you're making those right decisions, or find a trusted professional to guide you through kind of these waters. But wanted to show you this life insurance policy, by the way, again, just being one investment someone can look at, the money grows with guarantees. As you can see, it goes up every single year. It's not in swings with the stock market. It's not an up, down type thing. And one of the biggest benefits that then can create in terms of a rate of return is looking at distribution of assets. So what I'm going to show you here is kind of playing into that myth of how do I get good returns on my money. We're going to talk about what happens when we want to climb down the mountain. You know, an analogy we like to use here is more people die climbing down Mount Everest than climbing up it. That's very true with retirement planning as well. We focus so much on, okay, let me accumulate wealth, let me max out my 401k, let me build up a real estate portfolio, whatever it may be. We find many people don't think about, well, what happens when I need to actually spend this money? What's the strategy here? And that became a huge study in the past decade, really after 2008, 2009, when we saw the market tank and many people lost a tremendous amount of money in their 401ks. And it became a scary situation. All of a sudden, we had to say, whoa, people don't have as many pensions anymore. We're counting on the stock market for our retirement primarily, our real estate, things of that nature. That's kind of common. How much money can I take from my 401k per year? What happens if the market tanks one year? What do I do? And what this is going to show here, this calculation to kind of help with that myth, we're going to look at a 15-year study period here, assuming someone retires with $1 million, and we're going to compare that money of what if it was sitting in a place like a life insurance contract earning 5%, versus what if that million was sitting in the stock market, the S&P 500, which is a great measure of the stock market, and now we're in retirement and we want to spend $60,000 per year from this account. So again, let's say we're 65 years old, we saved up $1 million. Don't get caught up in the numbers, it's the concept. And from that million, we want to spend 60 grand per year. Seems pretty reasonable. You have $1 million, hey, let me spend 60,000 per year. And we're going to look at a stock market chart here, historical chart, and say what would have actually happened during these time frames. What would have been the results? I love this calculator. It's really cool. It allows us to do a really cool study here. If you see me sliding up at the top, the green bars are simply years the stock market went up. The red bars are years the market went down. I'm going to scroll to the worst time in really economic history for our country, the Great Depression, 1929. And if you look at this bottom, the solid bars here is that $1 million if it was sitting in the stock market. The straight line is if the million was earning a guaranteed 5% per year, while this person is spending 60 grand a year up the account. So if you look at this blue bar, why is it at 816 right off the bat? It's because the stock market went down 13% and the person spent $60,000 to live on, pay their bills, their rent, their mortgage, whatever it is. What's kind of scary to look at here is if this person had their retirement money in the S&P 500 and simply just wanted to spend 60 grand a year, their retirement account would have been completely drained in just 6 years. Now, if their money was sitting somewhere earning just a guaranteed 5% return, they'd still have 875 grand. This is a really long time ago. Let's look at a more relevant, more example that's more recent, 2000. Some bad years during the dot-com bubble, 2008, you see the market drop 38%. But look, this person started with $1 million. They just want to spend 60 grand a year. Again, that's what's happening in this example. We're not taking taxes into consideration, assuming no tax. 13 years, they're completely out of money. And that's what's led to so many studies of saying, how do we solve this problem? How do we climb down the mountain? How do we build up money in these retirement accounts? How do we actually spend it? Now, traditional planning, they tell us, we read a Fidelity article and it says, hey, you can get 8% in the market. They don't talk about all these ups and down swings about when we want to actually take our money. So we're told, okay, well, when you retire, when you turn maybe 50 or 60, move all of your assets to something conservative. People are living very long now. Retirement might be 20, 30 years. If you have your assets in a conservative account, only earning 2, 3, 4% to not have to deal with these swings, there's a huge lost opportunity on your money if for 20 or 30 years you're missing out on stock market growth. So if we're told to get an 8 or 10% in the rate of return in the market, we have to take on risk. So when we're taught about traditional financial planning, and this is why so many people are failing, we're told, okay, don't worry, you will get 8 to 10% in your stock market account. We sit back and we say that really doesn't make much sense, because to get that rate of return, we have to be aggressive in our accounts. And yet at the same time, we're told to only be aggressive in our 20s and 30s. So we're only going for that 8 or 10% for really 2 decades, where a lot of people don't have the funds yet to save a lot of money. And then we're conservative for the next 50 years. Something doesn't add up. So how do we take advantage of the market? Because let's look at a great time. If you look at in the 80s, someone could have retired with $1 million, taken $60,000 per year, and they'd actually have $5 million at the end of the 15-year period. Back to my example, if someone was not invested, if they were not giving themselves the chance for growth, they would not have this money because they'd be conservative. Many people, though, in retirement, out of fear of these years, they move all their money into conservative assets. So the question becomes, how do we put ourselves in the position to take advantage of these great years that could happen? We don't know when they will, but they happen many times throughout history, but also protect ourselves when this occurs. This is by having an integration and coordination of our assets. It's a very simple solution, yet very few people are doing it. Have money that's what we call correlated, that's money in the market, and have money that's uncorrelated, money that's not in the market. That way, when the market's down, you don't have to sell your stocks and distribute. You can take from another place. It's a very simple strategy. Again, the product is not for everyone, but we're talking to a mass group here. So we wanted to give a simple example of a product that's been around since the 1800s. If you have money in that life insurance contract that's completely guaranteed, has worked since around 1850, in the down years, take money from the life insurance. Let the investment account grow again, because it's only a loss if you sell when the market's down. Now we have a few minutes left before Q&A, and I just want to show you one last kind of benefit of integrating and coordinating our assets, and that's our last myth, which I'm not going to go back to the slides. I don't think it's necessarily needed with the brief time that's left, but the myth is I don't need life insurance when I retire. Need is a question that a word that we don't really like to have in our planning. We're constantly hearing, how much do I need? And we don't live based on needs in any other area of our life. So to then have needs-based planning when it comes to life insurance or retirement or investing really doesn't make sense. It's like, what type of house do we really need? We could downsize to something really small. What type of car do you really need? So we want to focus on wants. We want to focus on abundance. And the question becomes, why do I want life insurance when I retire? And that's to leave a legacy behind. It's to be able to have proper distribution with safe money that's out of the stock market in retirement. And then lastly is a retirement situation where you can literally make $1 work like $2. You can spend twice as much money in retirement. I'm going to show you a very brief example here of how integrating and coordinating your assets properly can allow $1 to work like $2. And this is what we call an eternal rate of return. We could dive into this in more detail at another conversation, but there's 3 rates of return: internal, and external. This is an example of an eternal rate of return. And what we're going to look at here, let's assume someone retires with $3 million. The numbers really don't matter. On the left side is an example of traditional planning, retirement planning. On the right side, we're going to focus on a little bit less traditional. So if you were to Google, I talked about climbing down that mountain. If you were to Google, how much money can I spend in retirement? The traditional strategy is something called the safe withdrawal rate. You saw the risk in that last calculator. What if I take out too much money when the market's going down? You can run out of money at one point in 6 years, 13 years, not that long ago, someone would have ran out of money. So we have to be conservative with how much money we actually spend. All the studies out there from the traditional financial planning has shown you can take 4% of your wealth. So if we take a look at that, assuming no tax, which taxes are always involved, but let's just say that we had $3 million and we wanted to take 4%, that would mean $115,000 per year. That's just the interest on the asset. Assuming the $3 million is invested earning 4%, you have your $3 million and you're peeling off the interest per year. That way you still have the $3 million. You look at an end of a 20-year period, your $3 million is still intact, your retirement account. You spent $115 per year. That means you spent and enjoyed $2.3 million over a 20-year period. This is where most people live in retirement. They never spend the principal. They want to leave something behind to their wife, their husband, their kids, their grandkids. They don't know how long they will live, so they wind up just spending the interest. Little bit of a complex strategy, but it's a game changer if you can grasp it. Strategy 2 says, I don't want to just only spend my interest. I worked so hard. I want to spend my money. I want to enjoy my wealth. I don't want to go to early bird specials. I want to go on vacation, take my grandkids to Disney World, have fun, enjoy life, not worry about spending my money. But how do I do that? And what if I live too long? What if I run out of wealth? But here we can see if this person actually spent their money over 20 years versus only spending the interest, they would get to enjoy $4.2 million. Again, twice as much retirement money based on the same investable assets. What's the big downside though? Let's say they were 65, over 20 years, they have $0 left, $0 in their account. If they live 21 years or their wife or husband lives longer, nothing for the kids. That's the power of, well, what if they had $2 million of life insurance? That would replace the money to then be able to leave behind to their family, to leave behind to their wife, their kids, and also that cash value that was in the policy that you can take tax-free, no risk. So again, a little complex, but how do we create the proper swing to double our wealth? It's not just simply, ooh, what's the best stock out there? There's so many more creative ways to get ahead of this curve. And there's ways to succeed. And again, when only 5% of the population, studies show, are retiring with incomes where they can not have to rely on government assistance or family members for help or work a part-time job, there's a challenge. And there's absolutely solutions. We're going to open up for Q&A now. Certainly had some fun talking today, and hopefully we look forward to some good questions.
What a fantastic presentation. So interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we did get a couple questions, and I'll monitor for additional ones coming in if our audience wants to kind of keep them coming. But one of the first ones that came our way was about 529s. So they said, aside from 529s, are there other efficient college savings plans to use?
Really, really, really good question. So 529s are very popular accounts. We have many clients who utilize 529s, and I'll talk about the pros and cons very briefly. Pros, depending on your state, you get different tax benefits. You get the chance at growth in the stock market. Some negatives. While you have the chance for growth in the stock market, with retirement, it's much easier to say, hey, I'm going to push off my retirement 3 years. I'll wait for the stock market to recover. If coronavirus number 2 happens, the day you have to pay your, student tuition, and the market goes down 30% and you're in a 529 account that's invested in mutual funds, it's a scary place to be. So many times we find people do not actually want to have so much of their college education account tied to the market. Some people are okay with that risk because that risk comes with potential growth, but it is kind of scary when you think about that due to so much timing. In that chart before, we saw that there's some years where the market was down 3 years in a row. What do you do there? Well, again, it goes back to that kind of conversation. Well, I'll be more conservative as my child gets closer to college. Well, then the question comes up, what if the market tanks when your child's 13 years old and you are still risky? The only way to jump back and regain that loss is to stay aggressive. But our strategy was to get conservative at age 14. It doesn't always work as simple as we feel. Again, don't go stopping your 529, but there are other good accounts. For sake of simplicity, one big benefit, and by what I mean by that is there's multiple other types of accounts, but since we showed that example, life insurance policies are actually becoming extremely popular as a place to save for college education. Reason is, back in our grandparents' generation, life insurance was a place a lot of people saved money, and it's becoming extremely popular again because the market is shown. In the 80s, the market basically went up for 20 years. If you look at a stock market chart from 1979 to 2000, there is barely any down years. We've realized that that isn't the case. The market goes up and down. So when we can get a 6%, 5%, 4%, even 3% rate of return with little or no risk, life insurance is actually becoming a great place. So that's one thing you could look into. And one of the benefits behind a properly designed life insurance contract, opposed to a 529, in many cases, it does not count against you for FOSFA as well, which can be very valuable.
Super interesting. That's great. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because they're all around the whole life concept. So, are there management fees? Are there exit fees? And is it a risk that the company holding the policy would go bankrupt?
Really, really, really good questions, and questions we get quite often. I'm going to start with the risk. So that is certainly something to think about, and that certainly is the risk. The good thing that you're working with when you work, we stick to advising. For anyone out there that's listening that gets interested in this, if you do decide to look into a policy, make sure it's with a A-rated mutual company. Mutual is extremely important. There's a few good ones left: New York Life, Mass Mutual, Northwest, Guardian. These companies have been around since the 1800s. They've literally given a dividend every year since, most of them since 1860. So you're talking about companies that paid a dividend during 2 world wars, a Great Depression, Great Recession, and that's because the way they get audited, they have to hold a massive reserve. It's a requirement, and they get very strictly audited from third parties. So most of these companies, they have $5, $6, $7 billion in excess reserve. That's what has allowed them to stay alive since the 1800s and give a return every year, conservative return. Like, the market did great in 2019. Stock market went up, what, 28%? Life insurance was paying you 6%. Market tanked in 2009. Life insurance was paying you 7-8% dividend. So when it's good, when the market's great, life insurance is good. When the market's terrible, life insurance is good. It's the tortoise versus the hare. So it's slow and steady. The protections you have state insurance protection, similar to like FDIC insurance. So you have that government protection. And then there's something called a co-insurance treaty, which came out in the 1980s. All the major insurance carriers have to co-insure each other. So if one went under, the other have to pick up that block of business. So, hey, anything could happen. Aliens could come over and take over, but these are the safest institutions out there, and they're very conservative. If they were to go under, we have much bigger problems, and they have put in measures to protect against that. Now, to the fees, management, exiting costs, no, that's the beauty. There's no, well, that's not, in this type of policy we're looking at, there's not ongoing fees. There's things out there called indexed ULs, universal life, variable life, those policies, and that's where people get confused. They Google life insurance and there's all these articles that talk about fees inside of policies. It's important to know there's more than 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 types of life insurance. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of coordinations and designs. It's much more complex than people think, and that's where you really want a properly tailored policy that comes without rising fees. In these good old-fashioned contracts, the fee is very transparent and built into the policy. Year 2, this person paid 40. If they close it out, they get 20. Really transparent. There's not some ongoing fee. There's not any additional management fees. It's just all built into the contract. Really, if you look at it, by year 4, this person has 67 grand. Their account's jumping up by over the 20,000 they put in. It's jumping from 67 to 93. So 20,000 would be 87,000. They're actually, by that year, they're getting more than what they paid that year in investment growth. Why is there a loss in the first 2 years? You're paying for the contract. You're buying the life insurance. You're buying that future $4.4 million life insurance contract. Where these contracts can go wrong, and unfortunately, people sometimes enter these policies with not understanding them or maybe a bad advisor. It's not for the short term. You don't put your money here for 2 years. This is a midterm asset. And the other beauty, which I didn't mention, is there's no age restriction on access. So about 40, this person wanted to take some money out for a down payment or college education or whatever they want. There's no restriction. They could. And in proper design, the way it works is whatever money you distribute will ultimately come off the life insurance when you die. So in a very, again, simplistic way, not dollar for dollar, but if this person, we'll just use 65 as an example, they wanted 2.3 million tax-free, they would leave their family 4.4 minus the 2.3, but no sign-up fees, no different fees. It's a very transparent contract. And that's what's cool. It's contractual wealth versus statement wealth. In my own life, I have my 401k, I have my stocks, I have my life insurance, I have my real estate. The one thing I love about my life insurance is I know what I'm getting for the most part next year. It's a contract versus a statement, which changes every month through up and down swings.
Gotcha. So in the course of answering that question, you mentioned a couple of acronyms, I guess. So one person asked about IUL contributions. It said my company is offering IUL contributions. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's an indexed universal life. And to that person who's asking that question, it may be a good move. It may be a not so good move. Those policies, unlike the one we have on our screen, which is very transparent and clean, they're extremely complex and the projections do not always show accuracy. They're a very complex contract. They came out really became popular about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, because the stock market started doing so well that people got bored of looking at a 5-6% return in a life insurance policy. So they mixed the stock market and insurance. It can work, but it also can fail. At the end of this meeting, we will throw up our contact information. I'd be happy to, that's a little bit more of a detailed question, but I'd be happy to provide some additional guidance on that if you'd like.
Fantastic, thank you. There was one other question that was about a universal life, and that is, with no dependents, should I surrender or withdraw an old universal life policy with a death benefit?
So I would be giving you terrible advice. That'd be almost like if you went to a doctor and you said you had knee pain and without any sort of MRI, he gave you surgery. So I would be giving very bad advice if I didn't, get a little more detailed with you, but I'll do my best possible. Life insurance can be a great place to put money without dependence. I don't know if it's right for you without knowing your situation or seeing the contract. Again, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of coordinations of types of life insurance policies. If it's not the right type of policy, it's probably a not great place for you. If it's the right type, it could be one of the best investments you own. Same offer to you. I'd be happy to give you a little more personal guidance.
It sounds like the context is very important for matching the product with the person and their current situation. So thank you for the questions, and I hope our folks stay on to receive your contact information so they can do that follow-up. Having gotten to know you and preparing for this, I know how sincere you are when you make an offer like that, and we appreciate it. So I have another question that jumps back to when you were talking about S&P. So historically, would people do better by investing, and I hope I'm getting this right, the investing in the S&P within a Roth IRA versus a Roth IRA?
Can you ask that again? Sorry. I'll repeat. It sounds like the question was, would they be better off in a Roth or not in a Roth?
It sounded like I don't, clearly I don't know that much about Roth IRAs, but what I was reading was, let me read it, go back to the questions box and read it verbatim.
Okay.
Historically, would people do better by investing in the S&P within a Roth IRA account? Wait, I gotta scroll down. Versus a Roth IRA.
So questions, the question's a little confusing to me, but what I'm guessing the question is, would they be better off investing in the S&P inside of a Roth or not a Roth? So another sometimes people are confused by is they think a Roth is an investment, like it's a type of investment. It's not. It's just an account title that comes with tax benefits and government kind of rules and restrictions. A Roth can be an extremely great place to build wealth, just as the same benefits, if used properly, at like the life insurance, it can grow money without paying that compounding of tax, like Jeff illustrated. Your snowball melting a little bit every year because of taxes can destroy the snowball. It can eat up so much because you're not just paying that tax, you're paying what that tax could have earned you if it was still in your snowball compounding. So Roths protect against that. Really good account if you qualify. So if you looked at a black and white example of someone putting away money for 30 years in an investment and it was in a Roth or not in a Roth, the Roth would win versus just a taxable place getting taxed year after year. I don't know if that's a specific question, but Roths are good. Are they for everyone? I'm not going to keep repeating myself. I don't know. I can't speak to the masses with one question, but they certainly are a great place. They do come with income restrictions, et cetera. There's only so much you can contribute, but they can be a great wealth builder. And for the sake of time, in case people are jumping off too, I don't know if we mentioned earlier, but for people who see our contact information up, Jeff's an alumni. He asked me if we'd be okay with this. I agreed. For anyone who has spent the time and on this call, we're willing if you just mention that you're part of this presentation. We are happy to have a individualized 30-minute conversation where you can really ask specific conversations. It's a nice way for us to give back. And you see our email and our phone numbers up there. If you just shoot us a message and say, hey, I was part of this webinar that you gave on financial myths, our team can set up a conversation with you and we can dive into very personal questions and give you the best advice.
Wow, Joe and Jeff, that is extremely generous. Thank you for extending that offer. My goodness. Wow. Thank you. I'm going to give you the last question, and that is about maxing out 401k. In difficult financial situation, should you still max out your 401k?
Okay, so this one we get all the time. I want to lead with saving and investing is always better than not saving and investing. So if it's, do I put money in my 401k or do I spend it on Macy's? Hey, we all know which is going to give you a better financial position 20, 30 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever it is. But one big flaw we see is clients' lack of liquidity. And that's why if you look at the statistics of how many people tap into their 401k before proper age of over 59 and a half, there's years where it's been over 50%. Right now with COVID, the government had to come out with all these rules to help people access money because why? Most people's wealth is all tied to their primary residence and their 401k. Not that those accounts are bad. The club is not bad, but the swing is off. Meaning if life throws you a curveball, a good one or a bad one, because one thing we know, life will throw us emergencies and opportunities. If you don't have liquid money, it may not be the best idea to start stocking away money for an account you can't touch until you're 60. But again, we all sit down, our coworkers doing the 401k, we're told it's the first thing we should do. But if you look at basic human understanding, and if you ask yourself, wait, I can't even handle a curveball right now, a good one or a bad one, because I don't have enough just money I can access without fees or penalties. Should I really start taking my money and locking it up in jail for the next 30 years in a place that I can't touch without getting crushed with taxes, restrictions, etc.? So I'm going to give you, don't listen to my advice without, if you're really in that position, please reach out for the personal conversation. But for someone who does not have liquidity meaning proper access to capital, to money, to be able to handle life events, good ones or bad ones, because you might get the biggest opportunity of your life. You'll need money to act on it, or you might have a big emergency. If that's the case, build up that short term, build up some protection first with money, almost the moat around the castle. That way you don't have to touch the castle before, let the thing ride where you won't have to dip into it before you're supposed to. So it sounds like you may not be in the best position to be maxing out the 401k, and maybe we should focus on some other things first. Still save and invest, but maybe into accounts that if you need to touch it, it's a little easier, while still, building up the pure long term. Really good question. I'm sure that helped a lot of people. So thanks for asking that. And that's one of the biggest flaws we see in the world today. 2008 was an unbelievable example. If people had all their money tied up in their primary residence and their 401k accounts, both got clobbered at the same exact time. That's a really scary place to be, and it causes people to make bad decisions because they panic and they see all their wealth drop 20, 30, 40% in a very brief time frame. What did a lot of people do? They moved their money inside of their 401k to cash because they panicked. That's what happens if you have all your money in one basket and you haven't planned properly with the correlated, uncorrelated money, the guaranteed, the risky money, accessible and non-accessible money. So really, thanks for asking that question. That's a really good one.
It's not the first time in one of our webinars that we have heard some iteration of cash is king, and how important having some degree of liquidity is. So the person who asked that question that required clarity did send it in, but we are short on time. So Michael, please connect with Joe and Jeff with the contact information that we provided so they can clarify that response to that question. I want to thank a great audience and great presenters. We had a fantastic presentation, and I love that you not only dispelled some of the commonly held myths about finances, but you addressed all kinds of different questions that we had. So we appreciate that so much. And to everyone listening, just a couple of friendly reminders. Our virtual Lunch and Learn series takes place on Wednesdays at noon Eastern. We hope it's easy for you to remember because it's the middle of the week and the middle of the day. For more information, you can always visit our webpage. It's long, so I'm glad to tell you that we do email it to you as well. business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. We have an exciting schedule of topics and presenters lined up over the next several months, thanks to great suggestions from our audience. so we encourage you to keep sharing your ideas with us. We want the series to continue to meet your needs. Please stay online briefly for just a moment longer when today's webinar ends. You'll immediately see a 3-question survey about today's event, and one of those is a free-form field that you can type in the topics and/or speakers that you'd like to see featured in our future webinars. And finally, as I mentioned when our webinar began earlier, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be shared via social media and emailed to you. It will also be on the Business Insights page of our website. Thank you, everyone, so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.